Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Tyler.
We got some catching up to do. We have both been pretty busy in December. So we're going to talk about 3 episodes of Fargo. We're going to follow each character, sort of, and then talk about how we're feeling about the season overall and, like, kind of what's next in our eyes. So today we're talking about episode 4, Insolubilia. I think that's how you pronounce it. Episode 5, The Tiger, and episode 6, The Tinder Trap. So yeah, overall, I think these 3 episodes and the season as a whole has been, like, really great. But I think it's kind of stagnated in some sort of way. And I think these 3 episodes kind of, like we were talking off mic, are kind of like in conversation with each other. And, you know, it just kind of lined up with the fact that, like, we've been pretty busy lately. So yeah, I guess we can just kind of start by talking about, like, Dot and Wayne and what has happened since we last talked. Their house burned down. Wayne has been shocked and is very childlike right now. And then Dot has been on a Macaulay Culkin-esque rampage throughout Minnesota.
It's interesting how you know, the arc of these 3 episodes compared to the arc of the previous 3 episodes, because like you said, it sort of has stagnated in some ways, as we'll go into deeper in this conversation. It sort of has, you know, some things have reset, but I think that the through line of the season that hasn't, you know, has been consistent is the Dot storyline. I think a lot of the tertiary characters and plot lines have kind of been moving up and down and stagnating a little bit, or, you know, switching up and in ways that aren't, you know, always perfect or as interesting as the main plot. But that main plot of Dot just being, like you said, like Macaulay Culkin Home Alone is solid. And, like, again, just an opportunity to say that Juno Temple is absolutely, like, pitch perfect in this show. And it's an interesting season of Fargo because intelligence within characters is sort of, you know, it fluctuates depending on the season. Often the, you know, like the David Thewlis character in season 3, very, very smart, very far ahead of a lot of the characters. In other seasons, it might be a police officer that's, like, further ahead. In this season, everyone is pretty stupid except for Dot. You know, Roy has, like, a level of like manipulative intelligence, or, you know, like some, you know, in that sort of way. But Dot's, like, ability to stay ahead of everything is one of the things about the season that's just, like, really fun. It's sort of it does shift the sort of tone of this season from previous seasons, where you can just watch these and kind of just laugh, because, like, it is very comic inherently, and yet there are still opportunities that they take to, like, really hit home, like the deeper, like, emotional element of this. Obviously, that she's, like, coming from, like, this abusive relationship, and, you know, Wayne is just, like, such a sweetheart, and it's so sad when everything that happens to him, and the relationship that Dot has with Scotty also. So there's still emotional depth, but, like, that A plot remains just, like, quite funny on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I think something interesting you touched on too, with Dot being, like, just more intelligent than every single character this season, which, frankly, for, like, a main character in Fargo, that is, like, a miracle. Like, I don't think
Right.
we've ever had a main character in Fargo that's smarter than anyone else in the series. But again, like, with that emotional depth you're talking about, like, it's super interesting to see that she's smart and she's trying to do all this stuff to protect herself. But at the same time, like, the people she cares about don't have the capacity to, like, follow her. So it's like, you know, Scotty, she has to leave with Olmsted. Like, Wayne, she kind of has to leave in the hospital. She can't take him with her or she'll be caught. So it's like, she's very smart, and you can tell how, like, Roy didn't catch her for 10 years. Like, that's something I really like about, like, how intelligent she's been portrayed, because it's like, oh, I can totally believe she went missing for 10 years and no one found her until, like, right now. Right. But again, at the same time, it's like, there's that sad aspect to it where it's like, she's probably not going to have a happy ending. Scotty and Wayne probably won't be in her life by the end of it. And the reveal at the end of episode 6, where it's like, she's been so abused by Roy, it's like, well, now there's, like, more motivation there, but it's like, how's this going to end for her? And I hope it ends well, but also, like, it's not, you know, looking too good for our tiger.
and like you said, the her being more intelligent than everyone else. Thank God, like this season, the villain isn't Billy Bob, in season 1, who can do anything, and Thulis in season 3, and like in other ways Hansi in like season 2, and like the Gerhardt family, because like leaving Wayne behind in the hospital, or like leaving Scotty, in other seasons that's a death sentence, because like the villains are just so formidable. In this season, it really is just more comic, because like they are not formidable at all. And like, for as intelligent as Roy might be, he still is relying on Gator to like do all of this stuff and putting it in his hands, and like even with the beginning of the season putting it in Munch's hands. That's where this sort of, and I'm not trying to jump into the Roy stuff quite yet, but him taking more action in these episodes is quite important for the arc of the story, because him going to Lorraine and him trying to wrangle a little bit more is probably going to get him closer to his ultimate goal, because he is by far the most intelligent character on his team.
Yes, exactly. Back to Dot a bit. Just some funny stuff, especially in episode 5. The first half was like a narration done by Jason Schwartzman, having a huge year, formerly Josto in season 4, lovable loser, Josto, very rich, lovable loser. But yeah, like in this sequence, she like breaks a guy's nose, she pokes out another guy's eye, like they're like doing all they can, like, to stop her from escaping, and she just escapes, and it's like a very funny sequence, but also like very like it's cool to see a formidable main character. She switches the names, so they take this guy who has cancer, who really feel bad for that guy, and we'll talk more about him when we go to the Roy stuff. But yeah, this hospital sequence was really great, and again, like, it's not only that Juno Temple is doing a good job of portraying this Minnesota person who's like very like active and stuff. There's so much heart to her character that I haven't seen, that you don't really see in a Fargo character. Like everything is in the face. And I feel like I see when she's like really nervous. I see when she's like freaking out, like when she's talking to the FBI and Gator's coming in and like all this stuff's happening. You can feel the tension. And again, the music and the cinematography is doing a lot too, but like Juno Temple's doing so much. And I really hope she gets a lot of awards love, because I genuinely think this is the best Fargo performance. And it's not discounting any other Fargo performance before this, but I think this is the best one since Billy Bob Thornton. Like, it's like, I don't see Juno Temple at all. It is just like Dot, and she is wonderful this season for sure.
Yeah, it's really that emotional intelligence that you're talking about, because like but part of it also, like, I think what's always interesting in Fargo is like what the aspirations of the characters are, because they live in this world, this state, this place where like your aspirations maybe aren't that grand, and it's even sweeter and more sincere for this character of Dot because of the circumstances that she was coming from. It wasn't that, Martin Freeman is, stuck in this life and is bored and like wants to just do better at his job and like be respected by his wife and stuff like that. And then stuff happens. It's that, Dot has gone through hell, like she says to Lorraine in a previous episode. Like, she's gone through all of these different like levels of hell to get to where she wants, and where the place that she wants to be is just a wife, just like making Bisquick pancakes and stuff for her daughter, and just having a nice, cozy, simple life. And I think that that's pretty, it's like very sweet. And at this core of this story, like that's all she wants. She's not trying to escape this simple life. She actually wants the simple life. And it's just kind of, it makes it even sadder again when Wayne gets, shocked, and when Scotty has to be taken away. So by far the best thing of this season is Dot. I think that they focused correctly on the right character. I know that sounds very simple, because like obviously Dot's the main character and she probably always was going to be, but like other seasons they would have been interested in different characters in this story, and they chose to focus on Dot and her story.
And again, it's great, and we talked about this in our first podcast of the season. It's like Noah Hawley is really doing an inversion of the Fargo trope, where it's like yeah, all these characters want to get out of the simple life, but she wants to do the simple life, because she, again, like you were saying, she's been through hell. And as that's revealed this season, it's hands down the most interesting thing. Like, it is heartbreaking to see all of her bruises, and, just it unravels in such like a nice way where like, oh, like John Hamm's this like kind of funny, like Trumpian character. But then as you get deeper, and again, you see how he treats his wife right now, and like you hear stories about like, Roy and, Dot back in the day. And it's like, oh, wow. Like, this is, again, it was funny, but now it's getting like serious and not funny at all, which is, again, beautiful and very Fargo.
Yeah, I think that's super well put. Let's jump over to another character. Who do you want to sort of run through the arc of?
Let's save Roy till the end. So let's talk about Lorraine, and then we can kind of talk about Olmsted too. But Lorraine's arc, sort of these few episodes, again, most of the same. It's kind of just like a power struggle between her and Roy. She wants to buy out this banker named Vivian in episode 5. And then Roy also wants Vivian for his own doings, and then it's like he's kind of caught in between. And then overall, like the more interesting part, I think, of Lorraine's story is with Olmsted, where she's like, oh, you're like, it's been an interesting arc with the two of them, because Lorraine has been like, oh, like, what do you do as a police officer? Like, blah, 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 blah. And then she's like, oh, also, I know, like, you're like very poor, and you're like you're with your payments and all this stuff, and you're in debt. And then at the end of episode 6, Olmsted gives her the file on Dot, and then Lorraine offers Olmsted a job to work for her in security, and she's basically like, it's a blank check, you can do whatever you want. And I think it's interesting. I think Jennifer Jason Leigh has been really good this season, even though at first I was like, oh, what are they doing with her character? But again, it is this, we have two opposing Trumpian figures with Mrs. Lyon and Roy Tillman, and it'll be, and they're Trumpian in the most way, in the sense that like they're mostly all talk. And the reason they can walk some of the time is because both of them have like a lot of money. But I'm very interested with Lorraine, and it's like, does she identify with Olmsted in some way, or is this just kind of like a play? Does she actually want someone with a lot of heart on her security team, because like all her other guys kind of fucking suck. Like, her granddaughter was taken by Dot without like any of them noticing. Yeah,
I think that the Trumpian call is correct, and I think that there's a couple of interesting things there. First, I think there's, Lorraine was like one of the characters that I was least interested in with this season. I still just I think Jennifer Jason Leigh is like one of the just best performers like out there, and she gives really interesting, understated performances in a lot of movies, and she's a great actor. I just have been tripping on the accent this whole time. It's really just like, why did they have to make this like this aristocratic, like British, matriarch of this family? Why couldn't she just be Jennifer Jason Leigh? Like, I think the accent makes it seem a bit more, it just comes off just much more obnoxious than anything else. And that's not a performance thing. It's just like a decision, a narrative decision. Cause she has a few lines where she mentions like the difference between like Americans and, Europeans or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, when Jennifer Jason Leigh's her best, she is like revolted, like in a good way. Like I think The Hateful Eight is one of her best performances, and she is just like yelling and screaming, and it's awesome. You know?
She's great. And I do think that in these episodes 1 through 3, I was just not interested. I just wanted to get away from her scenes. I think she was used in a way to monologue these like bigger ideas that are more interestingly talked about in other characters and in other seasons as well. But these 3 episodes, they actually give her like a little bit of color. There are moments she obviously tries to have Dot institutionalized at one point, and then Dot has to escape from that. But she also has like a line at one point where she's like, when she's talking with Roy, of like, I'm not giving her over to you because like that's my son's wife. So there is like, she doesn't like her at all, and like in many ways she does and doesn't relate to Dot, but still there's at least some level of protection from outside forces. Like she can be evil to her, but like nobody else is allowed to do that.
Yeah, I was like shocked with her and Roy's scene, because she was mostly like, oh no, she's not your wife anymore. You know,
right.
she is my son's wife.
And it's interesting because, you know, she has, within that scene and within the scene where she's talking with the bankers at lunch, there is the element of like, she's a powerful woman and like these men are, you know, misogynistic at the least in the way that they're interacting with her. And her response to that is like, let's ruin this banker's life and like, let's not give Roy Tillman what he wants. And like, even though Roy and her, like you said, are both Trumpian figures, it almost highlights how odd the Trump camp was and still is, because like you have a lot of people who are unifying underneath this banner, this character of Trump, who have completely different interests and sensibilities, and they maybe only share a few things in common. You know, they've set up the thing about debt, and you know, the obvious like money is an influence for both of those characters, but like other than that, like they couldn't be any more different. So like the fact that they are both, you know, under the same banner is in and of itself a pretty interesting commentary on, you know, what Trump's America is and was.
Yeah, and that's what, you know, we've talked about this too, because I think we're both kind of hesitant about commentary on the Trump era, because it's still so fresh. It's still so like we lived through it like less than a decade ago. Like I remember in drama in high school, like we before he ran for president, we had like the Donald as like our god in one of our sketches, and it was like, this was funny back then, but now when we're looking at it, it's like this era wasn't really all that funny, and I don't think anyone particularly does good commentary on it. But I was very nervous when I was seeing Roy and I was seeing Lorraine, and I was like, oh, what are we doing here, Noah Hawley? And I'm happy to say that his commentary is very subtle and it's very interesting. And like you were saying, it's like they're all under this banner of like of Trump, but like they all have different goals and wants, and I think that is a big interesting commentary on the Trump era and what's, you know, probably going to come back in 2024. And Noah Hawley's been doing such a good job of doing it subtly and not just like, isn't it crazy how loud these people are? It's like, that's not the problem, you know? It's you know, decades and decades of like these different groups being upset, and then one guy being like kind of the messiah to them, even though he's not.
Totally. And like, and again, not to jump ahead to Roy, but like Roy has this whole subplot of like this militia that he's, you know, funding with guns and money and shit. And like, it was even kind of clear that there was some differences between the militia, you know, at least as portrayed as his like father-in-law versus him in terms of like what their interests are. So like everybody is like working again under this Trump banner, but like everyone is just they're so different, but the similarities are still there. Cause you know, like when Lorraine does offer Olmsted a job, you know, it in some ways makes sense for Lorraine, because, you know, Olmsted seems competent and would be good at the job, but also like it's a way of demonstrating power over her. And, you know, it's not a purely altruistic thing, you know, it's like, what's the easiest way to just get rid of like any problems that she might have with Olmsted is just to buy her out, you know, just to pay her money, and she knows that she has leverage because of the debt thing, because, you know, Olmsted's husband is just an absolute idiot and complete piece of shit.
And power is really interesting in Lorraine's story, and I think that's what has made her more interesting to me in the last 3 episodes, is that, now we're seeing like everything that she does is pretty much a power play. So it's like the reason she was like mad about Dot in the first episode or the second episode was because Dot had power over her. Dot had leverage. But as she learns more about other people and stuff like that, it's like now she has more power over them. Like now she wants to have power over Olmsted. And that's just like an interesting character to me. Like even her art in her office, I was like, oh, that's kind of stupid that it just says no. But it's like that is a power statement. You know what I mean? She has the power to say no to you if she wants to. And she's saying no to Roy, you know? And she... Yeah.
And again, it's, you know, that in and of itself, just a character who wants to inflict power over people, not terribly interesting, and that's how she sort of came across in those first few episodes. But, you know, there's like a real emotional, you know, undercurrent to when she's talking with Olmsted and then when she is looking through the file. And like, it's not just that she is this like monster there, but then also she immediately is just like, hey, Vivian, like, your kid's not going to college. He's been expelled. You're going to rot in debt. So they've colored the character in a bit more to make it a bit more, or to make her a bit more complex. And definitely for the better of the show. Yeah. And
again, like, I feel like we keep coming back to this, but Scotty is like such an important character this season because she's kind of the heart for many of the characters, whether that's Dot or Lorraine, or even in some regards, even Roy. Like we'll talk about that when we get to Roy. We're saving him like later in the episode, but yeah, no, it's really interesting. And, again, it's nothing like flashy, and I'm excited to see this season as a whole. But again, it's just good television because it's not like it's banging you over the head with something like a cliffhanger every episode. It's like, oh, that was like, I feel like I ate a full meal at the end of every episode. I'm like, this is great. And again, it might not be like shocking or like anything. Like season 2, I think we both agree is the best season. Every episode after like episode 2 or 3, I think ended in like a shocking, mind-blowing way. But again, I don't think you already made that season, you know. Make a more and again, I think this is one of the more interesting seasons of Fargo overall, for sure.
Yeah, just down to like its simplicity, and also like some of the decisions that they're making, you know, in regards to like Munch and stuff, you know, because Munch is a character who, at the end of our last conversation, we were saying like something can't, like, because he was going into Roy's house, and then Gator and the boys were going into Dot's house, and like the setup of those two things happening simultaneously, we were saying like, there's probably going to be some sort of rug pull, and the rug pull was it was less of a pull and just more of like indicating, can you get off the rug really quick? I'm just gonna politely change it, because ultimately what you expect to happen out of the Dot stuff kind of does. You know, the Wayne getting electrocuted was a bit of a shock. Pun unintended. Jesus. But bitch. I was surprised that Munch's big master plan, after getting all naked and covering himself in goat's blood, was just to give him a sign, just to write something on the wall and be like, "Hey, you still owe me," and I know that again, it's a flex of power. It's like, I could kill anyone in this house, but I didn't. But again, so the decision to not elevate and get crazier, but to actually, calm it back down, and then over these 3 episodes, stay at sort of this neutral pace where things don't get too crazy, don't get too wild. But also they're like, but there is a bomb. Like, just like, it's kind of like showing the bomb and then being like, we're not gonna do anything with it right now, but there is a bomb and we could explode it if we want to. Like, and there isn't that much to talk about with Munch, so maybe we could just briefly mention some Munch stuff now, and it'll tie back into Roy when we get to him as well. But I think that's a great point. Yeah, it's the Munch character was moving really fast at the beginning of the season, was elevating real quick. We have this flashback 500 years, and it's like, okay, wait, what is this season going to be if this is like one of the main characters? And then they kind of just remove him from the show almost entirely. He has that one bit where he's in the bathtub and he says he wants pancakes, and like, that was silly. Cool. And then he comes back in with like the deal that Roy decides to make. But the threat is still there, because I think that we do know the extent to which this character, one, will go, but also the like supernatural element of it that can always come back into play, of like whether this guy is really 500 years old or if he's, or if that's just sort of a metaphor. Regardless though, yeah, the that guy still exists in the show and like is in some ways freed at the end of this, these 3 episodes. And so with that freedom, what are his interests? How does he come back into the show, and what does that mean for everybody going forward?
Right. And it's interesting to see Gator being one of his foils this season, because it's sort of like, what's Gator doing? Like, I know we've seen he's like 500 years old and what we can do, and like what he can do and stuff like that. But it's like, he handed Gator his own ass like twice, like I don't understand why Gator's still on this fucking shit where he's just like antagonizing this guy. And it's like he's like a Lauren Malvo type. You don't want to fuck with this guy, dude. Don't fuck with this guy. And again, maybe he didn't have a mother, growing up, and maybe that was like a big issue for Gator. But like I am just so concerned for Gator, because I'm like, dude, this guy means business. And like, again, Roy, like the reason I don't feel nervous for Roy is because like Roy, I think, respects Munch, and I feel like there's a mutual respect there in some ways. But he is truly a crazy wild card. And, like I think it's going to be exciting to see where Munch goes. But yeah, not too much in these 3 episodes, especially after the shocking reveal that he was 500 years old.
Yeah, but going, let's go through to Gator now, because I think you were hitting on some stuff that was super interesting there. And like, there's stuff to talk about from these 3 episodes, but just in line with what you're talking about, it is interesting to think about the arc of his character over the course of the season, because all season long he's been set up as just this absolute moron. Like, he can't do anything right, and he gets his arm broken. He like fails multiple times to capture Dot. But there are moments where it's kind of an open question of like, how much does he know about like the Wayne thing? Like, it seems odd that like he wouldn't recognize that this guy that they captured wasn't Wayne. He says to Roy that it was dark, and like, maybe that's true. Maybe he is truly just an idiot, or maybe he has some intentions. Maybe it's not just that he is just following what Roy is telling him to do. And within all of that sort of word salad, what I'm interested in is like where they want to land the plane with this character, because if you're setting him up all season to fail and fail and fail again, they're either going to subvert that and he's going to do something right, whether that's good or bad for the plot or for the character himself or for, Roy, is irrelevant. But like, is he going to successfully do anything this season, or is he just going to continue to fail, and that's going to just be its own commentary on like this type of person,
Right. Yeah, this like kind of young alt-right, like guns a-blazing kind of kid, like kind of like Kyle Rittenhouse, like interesting. Yeah. Again, there's interesting parallels with like youth and like conservativeness that I feel like Gator's really hitting on. And again, I think this is what youth used to just be in general, but it is really interesting to see it in 2019. And maybe it'll lead up to him failing so much that he trips and shoots himself in the face.
That's kind of what it feels like.
Like Gaetano. Shout out Gaetano. Crazy scene. I rewatch that every night. But yeah, and it's interesting to see how he has not a single good relationship in this series. With Roy, it's like a very like, with Roy is like the top of the hierarchy. Gator's kind of the bottom. Roy, Gator does whatever Roy wants. Again, he's trying to be a higher status than Munch, but he clearly cannot be. Even with Dot, it's like a weird thing where it's like it's revealed that like he calls her mom, and it's like, oh yeah, that would make sense. Like that age makes sense. But it's like, yeah, maybe he does go with Dot later in the season, because I've been reading their relationship a little differently than you, because like he like tells her to like be quiet when she's talking to the FBI, but also like he doesn't, like they're after Dot, you know, they're getting Wayne for Dot. So I don't understand why like Gator doesn't like tell them like that's Dot right there. There's Mama right there. Like we should capture her. So again, I'm curious where like he's gonna go. And while we talk about all these characters, I just want to say like I think like most every main character I'm like interested in, and I don't really know where they're gonna go. But if I could guess for Gator, I think he's kind of gonna have like a Darth Vader heel turn, in the sense that like he's on one side, but eventually I think he will go home with Dot. And if Dot has a happy ending, I think somehow Gator is involved. And you know, this might be incorrect, but I'm kind of feeling that how like Joe Keery's kind of playing it, and how like Gator's kind of written, because again, he is a fuck up, but it's like, how many times can you fuck up? And it's like, who can love you? Who can love a fuck up? Like your mother.
It's a great point. And I think it ultimately, I think, kind of comes down to how much empathy Noah Hawley would like to give to this kind of person in real life also, you know? Like, I do think that Fargo is interesting because sometimes it can be quite cynical and sometimes it can be very empathetic, and it depends on like who the character is and like their, you know, how they fit into society and family structures and all that. So I am very interested because we're empathetic people.
We are.
So like we would like to believe that there is like a road to redemption for him to become a better person if in better circumstances. You know, if he wasn't raised by Roy Tillman in this weird malicious state, if he was raised by Dot in more loving, you know, family centric house, his life would be completely different. So I'll be interested to see if Noah's perspective is that like this guy is a fuck up, he's always going to be a fuck up, and like regardless of how he was raised, like nothing is going to go well for this guy because he's an idiot and because of the way he was raised. Or like you said, if it's a Vader, you know, turn, and he's allowed to, you know, he's allowed to change, and he's allowed to understand that like his goals were entirely based off of his father's expectations and desires, and that he's not like his own man at all, and that he's not making decisions for himself. And you know, what happens when he does, you know, if he's able to make decisions for himself, if he's able to like set his own path, is he going to do the same thing, or is he going to not, you know? So yeah, I think it's a great call, because I think that the season has a lot of empathy, I think, you know, just in general. I think it's pretty fair to the characters. So I do think that it would be the most maybe emotionally rewarding as a viewer if he was given that turn.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the age-old question that I think you should leave asked. Like, does the baby think people can change, you know?
Yeah, that's a great
Does Noah
point.
Hawley think people can change? And we'll see. We'll see. Because I used to be a piece of shit.
I love that show so much.
Yeah, it's so good. Season 3 is great. We're going to get Tim Meadows on to talk about Fargo. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting discussion on Gator, and let's move on to the man of the hour. Why we all come to see Fargo every week. He's got nipple piercings. You know him, you love him. Ladies and gentlemen, Roy Tillman. He is. I said this off mic. He is quickly becoming the most despicable character in Fargo history, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, it says a lot. I think part of it's because of how, just how close to reality this character is, you know, like, you know, Lauren Malvo is the embodiment of evil, and Hansi sort of becomes that in a way in season 2, and David Thewlis, whose name I don't ever remember, because in my mind he's just...
VM Varga.
VM Varga. It might as well. You could do like the Tom Riddle Lord Voldemort thing with that, and it could spell out like the devil, and I'd be like, yeah that's right. Yeah, these are like embodiments of evil, and this season's gone away from that completely. You know, there's still a supernatural element with Munch and all of that, but like none of these characters are like an embodiment of an idea necessarily. Like there's lots of ideas within the characters, but like everybody is just a person who lives in a society. And, you know, like, and
they're
and, like,
all the Joker.
They are all the Joker. And like, but John Hamm as Roy Tillman, like, that's just a guy. And like the scariest thing about it is like that's a guy that like actually exists. And like the scariest thing about him, because in some ways Lorne Malvo is a nihilist, and in some ways like Hansi, VM Varga, like all of these characters are nihilists. Like Munch is a nihilist. Like that's scary because it's like they have no allegiance to anything, but like it's scarier when someone believes in something like to their core, and they're driven by God, and they're driven by the Constitution, and they're driven by, you know, these ideas of right and wrong, but their perception of right and wrong is so warped. So he is like a genuinely scary character in a different way than other villains have been in the show. And again, just the you know what the show is about. It's just this guy is a domestic abuser. He's a murderer. He just kills people in these episodes. He's funding a militia, a right-wing militia. He's just an absolute monster, but like a real life actual monster that exists in the world. And so that's pretty scary. And like you said, is truly despicable.
Yeah, like he's not going to have monologues about like the reality of the world and like what you think is not what you think, you know, like stuff like that, like some nihilistic takes out here. Like he'll literally just be like, this is correct because I believe it because God told me this was correct. You know what I mean? It's
which
like,
again it makes him a more Trumpian character, you know, because like VM Varga was a Trumpian character because of, you know, that whole season was truly about truth. You know, every season is, but like it's really about like what is, you know, these different realities that we were all living in. But like,
oh god, the ending of season 3 is so good.
A beautiful little choose your own adventure. Like, how do you think the country's going to turn out? But then, with Roy Tillman, it is like, it's just what I say is the law, and like, how can I be wrong? I'm a literal lawman. It was the same with Trump. It's like, I am the president, so what I say is presidential and true, and like, you know, you will follow what I say. And and it's just because, like, you know, for everything that Trump is, like, I don't think he's a nihilist, you know? I think he's driven by, you know, ego first and foremost, but also like, you know, just things. He has ideologies, even if they're insane, and shift and switch on a day-to-day basis. But like, Roy Tillman's ideology is clear, and it guides him, and it's guiding him towards Dot and like this possession that he feels over her. It gets grosser and grosser as the season goes on because of the lengths to which he is willing to go to capture her.
Yeah, and at some point it's like, dude, get over it, you know? But again, I don't think he doesn't, you know, at its core, this is just like a guy following a girl at the end of the night, you know? Like this between Dot and Roy. And it's scary, and I think John Hamm's playing it very well, and I know he hates playing this character. I can imagine. But he does such a good job. I mean, I think a good example of this was like one of my favorite scenes in these 3 episodes was when Vivian's coming out of the Tinder trap and John Hamm stops him. And I think Vivian says something like, "You can't do this to me anymore." And he's like, "No, I can." And then he like makes him take off all his clothes. And then at the end of like interrogating him, he's like, "Why don't you do a little dance for us?" And then he goes, "What?" And then Roy just goes, "I'm just kidding." It's like, no, he wasn't. He if you danced, he would have been happy. You know what I mean? It's like, and it also reminds me how, you know, we are big Walking Dead heads, and I truly believe, and I think, I don't want to discount Negan because I think Negan's a better character and a better, like, in context of Negan being a real life person, I think Negan is a better character, like a better person than Roy Tillman. But I do think, because Negan has like heart, and he's like not a dick, and he was a teacher and all this shit. But I definitely think this is like John Hamm's closest turn as Negan. Like this is what he would be like as Negan, which, you know, we always fan casted John Hamm as Negan. I think he would have been great as Negan. Jeffrey Dean Morgan's great, but it's like John Hamm really just gets to the core of like Negan in the sense that he's like, scary, but pretty funny sometimes. And, that's pretty terrifying. But again, I'm not saying like Roy Tillman is Negan, because I don't want to diss Negan like that. Roy Tillman is a despicable, horrible character who has no heart.
Yeah, and right, and you could see that in the scene where he goes back to the husband and wife who are in a domestic violence situation, and like he's going back to check in on them, and like sees another bruise on her wrist, and again, how scary it is when somebody is like driven by a particular ideology. He gave this guy an opportunity to change, and then he didn't. The guy pulls a gun on him. He is so cool, calm, and collected, and he's just talking at him, and then he fires on him, shoots him in the neck, and he dies there. And then he, again, back to what you're saying about like what he says is just, is fact. He's like, that's Munch, and we've solved it. We figured it all out. And that's another piece of this sort of overall resetting of the story is, there's just all these different elements that sort of get tied up, which are just now allow the characters to kind of go off and do something new. But like, that's a terrifying scene. And that's a scene where like, yeah, a la Negan, it's just like, these are my rules. I just bashed in a guy's head, and like, that's what happens. You don't listen to me, I'm going to bash a dude's head in, and like, you're all going to follow the roadmap after this.
And again, I think this will make Gator's eventual turn, I'm doubling down on this, interesting, because I think the question of this season is like, some characters think people can change, like maybe Dot thinks people can change, perhaps Gator thinks that. Roy doesn't think people can change, I think. At the end of the day, I think whatever he says goes, and if he sees you a certain way, that's how you are.
Definitely. And I think that these episodes like really gave him a lot, because him, again, going back to Lorraine and like trying to get the stuff he's doing with Vivian, the stuff that he's doing with this domestic abuser, which is just ironic because he is himself a domestic abuser. All of the like illegal activities that he has going on, they were understood in the first few episodes, but again, it's just creating greater like depth and understanding of like that this is just a truly despicable character, and he really believes everything that he's doing and saying, which is, again, terrifying.
Yeah. All right, so I think we kind of hit the head on the main characters. Now we can kind of just talk miscellaneous, whether that's like the FBI agents, Wit's role going forward, not like intelligence, but like Whitfar, the character, Lamorne Morris. Very interested in what he's been doing in the last few episodes. And then just overall, like maybe some predictions going forward, and then also just like if you have any criticism so far of the season, but it's kind of hard without like seeing the full thing yet.
Yeah, let's start with Whit real quick. There's not that much to say other than like it's an interesting decision that they set up Olmsted and Whit as like the two primary officers in the season, and they give Whit a lot of time in the beginning, and it seems like there's going to be this arc of, he gets shot, and then he's coming into the office, and he's still trying to do his job, and he's trying to find Dot, and like he's very driven to like figure this out because there's a dead officer, and again, he was shot. And so, you think that this is going to be like our sort of main police enforcement character throughout the season, but then he sort of falls off in these episodes. We don't see much of Whit. He comes to talk to Dot at the hospital, and he has the super funny, tagline from the trailer about the two realities thing isn't like a real thing. But yeah, his absence is interesting because what it means is that there is more room for Olmsted. And I think that, maybe this is simplistic. I don't want him to ascribe too much to this, but like, it kind of feels like as Noah Hawley was writing the season, he just became more interested in Olmsted and just sort of pivoted that direction. Cause it also, it's a nice sort of mirror to the relationship that Dot and Roy had. It's a different kind of, troubled marriage, obviously. Like Olmsted's husband isn't abusing her, but he is this very conservative, just weird guy, and like putting her into debt, and like her life is just not what she wants it to be. And her seeing this in Dot as well, there's just a greater companionship that can be created out of that, and that's why she helps Dot with Scotty, and that's why I think that's pretty much the reason why we get less of Wit, is because I think that there's just more connection to all of the different like thematic elements that Dot's going through, which is fine by me because I like Olmsted. But yeah, it is a shame that like there isn't more of Lamorne Morris in the season, because I thought he was quite good.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll be back in the season. Obviously, I don't think we've seen the last of him. But yeah, I mean, his story is like really connected with Dot and like finding Dot and her motivations and stuff like that. So as we like figure more of that stuff out, I think it's like very hard for him to still be in the series. And I'm sure he will be. And like, who knows, like there could be like a Colin Hanks, Molly Solverson type of thing going on with Wit and Olmsted, like by the end of the season. Just like, because they're both cops from different areas, and like Olmsted clearly like is not in a good relationship right now. So, and I'm not saying like that is the end of, like that needs to be the end game for those two characters, but I always think it's kind of like interesting to, you're dating someone who is just the complete opposite of you and you guys can't figure anything out. And then like dating someone who's like similar to you is just like interesting. And I feel like there's not a lot of like relational stuff yet this season. So who knows? But yeah, I do miss Wit. Lamorne Morris is really good. But I'm sure he'll be in the series too. FBI / the Fargo Syndicate. Pretty interesting. I feel like they're just there kind of to build tension and to explain stuff to characters. I don't have any strong feelings about them, but they have a fun little dynamic, I think. And again, it gives a cat to the cat and mouse game that we're playing with Dot, where it's like, oh, they just had Dot and she goes out the window, and stuff like that. So I feel like they're just like a fun addition. They're kind of like did you see Mission Impossible 7?
No, I still haven't yet.
Okay, well, Shea Wiggins is in it, who's also in he's in season 3 of Fargo.
He's in everything, that guy.
Is he in season 3 of Fargo? Is it 3? Yeah, because he's like Carrie Coon's sheriff, right? Or like sergeant, like second.
I think so.
Like
yeah,
first in command. Plays the same character in every movie. He's just like a cop. But again, his character is literally just to chase Tom Cruise around,
right.
Which, I think you need those characters. And again, I'm sure they'll connect to the wider story, but they're just fun so far.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Again, there's sort of is a soft reset through these 6 episodes, and that sets up for the final 4 episodes to go in any sort of which way that we want. We've set them up. They care, they actually, it's not that they're just like pencil pushers. They actually kind of want to figure this thing out. So their interest in it indicates to me that like they'll be in it for the long haul. Again, I'm interested in if this is just a sort of plot function to have those characters in there, just again to have an additive level of tension and to bring in like a more federal investigative side to this whole thing. Or if it's just going to be, kind of end in like a tragic comic sort of way, the way that like, Key and Peele, they get set up like late in the season.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, these guys like really want to do good. And then they just get slashed close to the end.
The Fargo casts in the 5 seasons are incredible. Nuts, insane that they got all these people.
There's not that much to talk about with them so far, but, I think that it's duly noted that they care about the story, Yeah.
And sorry, thinking about Fargo randomly, a lot of couples have started in Fargo.
Yes, this is true. Ewan McGregor and
Ewan McGregor and Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Jesse Plemons and Kristen Dunst.
So who's next?
If you want to find love, get cast in Fargo.
But yes, other things from these episodes, real quick. We talked about this off mic, so we don't have to go deeper into it than just a comment. But like, it was strange that Dot goes through this whole thing of getting out of the hospital, getting Scotty, dropping Scotty off with Olmsted. Olmsted has Scotty for a day or so, and then Olmsted drops Scotty back off with Lorraine again. It was just like this roundabout sort of thing, and it was like, wait, why was... It makes me actually go back to, like, it makes sense that Dot would want to take Scotty back from Lorraine, but also, like, Scotty was safe, in that situation. And so, I don't know, it was kind of just an odd roundabout thing, similar to, like, the guys going in to capture Wayne in order to get to Dot. Like you were saying, like, if Gator is trying to, if there is no, like, deeper motivation, then why doesn't he just be like, that's Dot, let's get her, forget Wayne, so there's just a couple of things in these episodes that hopefully sort of sort themselves out. But
and same with Munch. It's like Munch is after them. It's like, you owe me, and then it's like, you owe me again, like in medieval speak. And then it's like, oh, just kidding, like, we paid you and now you're on our side again.
Right.
And then it's like the same dynamic still with Gator for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. And then we already talked about sort of like the each episode is solid and good, and I enjoy it on like a episode to episode basis. But it is, it stopped building in a way, and it sort of is leveled out, and then hopefully these last 4 episodes starts to build up again and get to a crazier place. But again, this is a much simpler season of Fargo than we've had. So, maybe the aspirations of the season are not to get super crazy. Maybe it is just going to be quite simple.
Exactly. I agree with everything you've said. We talked about it off mic, but it's an interesting season, and again, we'll see where it goes. Like, again, there's not much like to watch on, like, in contrast to season 4. I think season 4 was doing a little too much in the sense that it's like, we had Devil Watch, we had Zombie Man, there were all these things that it's like, oh, what does this all mean? Does it connect? And it really didn't. So the fact that we have like this connected of a story, like we talked about each character, but pretty much every character appeared in our discussion of every character because like everyone's tied to everyone. And I know that's like very simple because like that's a story. But again, like, what did Timothy Olyphant have to do with like Loy?
That's a great point. Yeah, that kind of didn't go like, very far.
Did anything happen with that? Who was Timothy Olyphant?
I couldn't tell you at this point.
Then there was that other guy that had like OCD, or what did he have? He had like the tick.
Yes,
a tick.
That's right.
But he also kind of looked like Timothy Olyphant, so I kind of... And then there was whoever that guy was.
Man, there was so much good setup in that season.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's still a good season of television.
Yeah.
But like, when I think back on 1, 2, and 3, it's like, whoa, and maybe we can't, maybe after 3 seasons of a TV show, you can't ever go back to whoa. Like 1 was great, 2 was even better, 3 was a little step down from 1 and 2, but still really good. 4, really mixed bag. This season, like, who knows? But again, I don't think it's trying to one-up any season, which I think season 4 might have been trying to do. And again, kudos to having a big swing, because that shit was insane. Like, there were 2 gigantic families. And again, like, the whole story is starting the Kansas City mob, which we see in season 2 and, in 1 as well. So it's like, it is interesting to see that, but I think the story was a little too big, and COVID probably didn't help. And I didn't even mention the Smutneys. I didn't even mention the main characters of that season. So
yeah, and this is the only thing I have to say further on like Gator, but like just relating it to season 4. I was going to make a joke earlier that like Gator's arc was to become Mike Milligan at the end of the season.
Right.
But yeah, no, season 4 was pretty bonkers, and it got to some really fun places, and like just a stacked cast again. And hey, Sylvain White was directed 2 episodes in season 4, directing the next 2 episodes of this season. So
yeah, and I'm excited to see, because he directed 9 and 10, is that right? Or 10 and 11?
He did the Nadir and Happy, which I think was...
Shout out Happy.
Like 7-9 or something.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I remember those episodes being good. But yeah, it's exciting to be a Fargo fan right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. I don't have much else to say. I'm excited for the last 4 episodes. And, who knows? Hopefully we get 1 episode out, but it's Christmas time, so who knows? We might just be... The next time we talk, it might just be the last 4 episodes. So, looking forward to the rest of this season. Everyone's really great, and we'll see how it goes.